Have you ever wondered how slavery, one of the darkest chapters in human history, took root in the American colonies? Well, back in 1633, the colonies were rapidly becoming dependent on African slave labor to boost their burgeoning economies. The cultivation of cash crops such as tobacco in Virginia and sugar in the Caribbean was driving an insatiable demand for enslaved workers. As the colonies prospered, the darker side of their success began to surface. Colonial legislatures, recognizing the economic advantages of unpaid labor, started to enact laws to control the slave populations. These laws served to further entrench the vile practice of slavery, ensuring that the economic benefits derived from their labor were maximized. This year, 1633, marked a significant turning point in the history of the American colonies. In the midst of prosperity, a dark undercurrent was emerging, setting the stage for centuries of exploitation and human suffering. In the neighboring colony of Maryland, the seeds of slavery were being sown with an alarming speed. Maryland, a fledgling colony established just a year prior in 1632, witnessed its first significant wave of African slaves in 1633. This influx was not by chance, but a calculated move by the colony's founders. Inspired by the economic success of Virginia's tobacco plantations, they sought to replicate this model on their own soil. To do so, they directly imported African slaves to clear the land, cultivate the crops, and build up their own vast estates. These actions were not isolated incidents, but rather the beginnings of a deeply entrenched system. The choice to use slave labor was not merely a decision of convenience, but a deliberate strategy to maximize profit and build wealth on the backs of the enslaved. Thus, 1633 went for Maryland, setting a precedent for the widespread use of slave labor in the Chesapeake region. As the slave economies flourished, so did the laws that sought to control and dehumanize the enslaved. In 1633, various legal frameworks were introduced or solidified, tightening the shackles of slavery. These laws were not just about ownership. They regulated every aspect of a slave's life, from movement to work, even to family and social interactions. Imagine a world where your every action is dictated by a law that sees you less as a human and more as a commodity. Freedom of movement was severely restricted, and any form of resistance met with harsh penalties. These laws didn't just dehumanize African slaves, they institutionalized their status as property, stripping them of their human rights and dignity. This legal codification of slavery entrenched the practice, weaving it into the fabric of colonial society. Through these laws, slavery became an integral part of the colonial economic and social order, a haunting legacy that would echo through the ages. Unveiling the dark realities of 1633 requires us to delve into the historical sources that documented this era. These come in various forms, each providing a unique perspective. Colonial records and legislation lay bare the legal structures that normalized slavery. They expose how colonial assemblies passed laws that entrenched and regulated the institution of slavery. Ship logs and merchant records are indispensable in understanding the Atlantic slave trade's scope. These documents detail the number of slaves transported, the horrifying conditions of their voyages, and the chilling mortality rates aboard ships. Merchant records, meanwhile, sometimes reveal the economic motivations behind the slave trade. Personal diaries and letters offer, intimate insights into the daily brutalities of slave life, while a few preserved accounts from literate slaves add a deeply personal element to this historical analysis. Church records documenting baptisms, marriages, and deaths occasionally include information about slaves, offering insights into aspects of their lives otherwise left undocumented. These sources, while shedding light on the atrocities of slavery, also reveal the resilience and resistance of those enslaved, reminding us of the indomitable spirit of humanity in the face of oppression.